Hi.
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 Thank you. That's it for that slide. Okay, so moving on. I didn't realize I'd be number 2. I'm not sure I would have agreed if I knew I was going after Joe. But my name is Karin Tracy. I'm VP of Creative Services for a company in DC called Confluence. We provide graphic, web, and technical services mainly for nonprofits, organizations, and foundations. I've been working as a graphic designer for 14 years and started working in web as soon as I graduated from college. So I've done the two, coming out of an art school background for my whole career. So don't ask me to do anything else because this is all I know how to do. All right, so there's going to be a little overlap between what I'm talking about, what Joe talked about, and then likely towards the end what I'm talking about, what Amy's going to talk about. So I'm right here in the middle. But my idea is, where we are is you've got this great idea, right? So you've defined your goals, you've identified the audience, you can pitch the heck out of this product or service like nobody's business. You've done a lot of what Joe has talked about at this point, but there's no actual it yet. There is no packaged visual of what it is that you're selling or offering. It doesn't have functionality, it doesn't even have a look. So we've got several stages we need to go through here now to turn this idea and this data and research you've done so far into an actual product. We start with IA and wireframes. So what is information architecture? IA, information architecture. And I couldn't write a better description than Kevin Matt, so I just always use this one, but I just always make sure I credit him. So IA is concerned with organizing information, concepts, entities, relationships, functionality, events, content into a coherent structure or information space that is comprehensible, navigable, and searchable. In other words, grouping like content with like content. Figuring out where your similarities are, where your differences are, and making sure that you establish set groups that things fit into. And these things don't have to even exist yet. IA helps make projects future-proof by delineating and defining where items need to go in the future, things that may not even exist yet about your product or your service. So why is good IA critical to the success of my project, your project? Even if you aren't the core user for your product, put yourself in the audience's shoes, and this overlaps with a lot of what Joe was talking about. If they can't figure out what you do, how to find what they're looking for, how to take action, and action can be various things, contacting, downloading, shopping, engaging, etc., well, they'll leave. Bye-bye. I'm out of here. I don't have enough time to deal with this. I'll find someone else who does basically what you do, but has a better interface. So how do we start to form IA and how do we start to form IA, really? We always perform what we call a content inventory. So you may be redesigning or redeveloping your product, your site, your tool. You may be starting from scratch, but you've started to put together content that describes what your product is, what your service is, what assets you have. So a content inventory is essentially just a catalog of these assets for the existing or to-be website or application. I'm going to skip down a little bit and then pop back up. How you catalog this information is up to you. I'm kind of an Excel nerd, and I think it's helpful to create an Excel spreadsheet with column headers for each of these important types of information. That helps me with sorting because then I can just click the top of the column to see like items. You can handwrite this, you can do it in any way you want, but it's important to get this overarching catalog of what you have and what you're going to say. So important things in this content inventory are page titles, what each page is going to be called, the content that will fall on these pages, what type of content is it, complementary assets, so are there downloads, links, images, related documents, etc. that relate to each of these pages of your app, of your website. How often are you going to be updating these pages? That's important too because we'll talk about in the wireframe, but a successful site or app has a nice ratio of evergreen content to things that change frequently to keep people interested while still building on the base of who you are and what your product is. And then also level of importance, because level of importance obviously talks to hierarchy and importance of info. Okay, so I talked about creating an Excel spreadsheet. Do whatever you want to start to get all of that information in one place. Once you have this catalog of assets, you can move into creating a sitemap. Usually at this time in a presentation, I have to remind myself to slow down and not talk so fast. So if I'm talking too quickly for anyone, just let me know. Okay, so step 2, creating a sitemap. A sitemap is a simple visual structure that forms a navigational schema for your site or your tool or your app. Sitemaps can be expressed in myriad ways. Again, there's really no right or wrong when it comes to this type of work. Just what works best for you, what works best for your team, and the content that you have. So sitemaps can be expressed as a tree map, as exploded menus, sketches of boxes. I mean, probably the best ideas were constructed on cocktail napkins. So do whatever works for you. They don't have to be complicated, but they must group like content with like content. So here are some important tips. Name sections of your website, sections of your app. Name them logically. I usually say, unless you're selling cute, avoid folksy, cutesy section names because people will find them really irritating, and if they have to think for more than 0.5 seconds about what this is, they'll move on. And they're just annoying. Always refer back to your UX strategy. Always keep your audience in mind. Second guess every decision you make by looking back to say, is this what the users are going to be expecting? And 9 times out of 10, the products, the tools that I develop, I'm not the end user. So I have to really remind myself as a designer to step back and say, okay, does this work for the audience that we've defined? In mind. Especially if you think about how much money companies and our clients' organizations are pouring into developing these websites now, they deserve for this site or this tool to be future-proof. I'm not saying that a site I designed today is going to look great in 5 years, but it's going to look great in 3 years, and it's still going to work really well. It's going to grow really well. And that's a combination of creating a strong navigation schema, which allows you to grow the tool, allows you to put new content in place, and also from a design standpoint, it's really adhering to common design principles, trusted design principles, and not designing stuff that looks trendy, unless that is the exact need of that product. Okay, so examples of sitemaps. What does a sitemap look like? Like I said, it can look like whatever you want. My company and I are fans of Protoshare.com. This is the tool we use to create sitemaps and wireframes. And I know, Catherine, that you did a talk about wireframes, so I looked at that. So there's myriad wireframing prototyping tools out there. I just happen to prefer Protoshare, but sometimes I do them in InDesign because I'm a print design nerd, and I like to make them look really, really nice. And a lot of wireframing tools don't allow you to do that. So sometimes I need the flexibility and a little bit of the design help that I can get in InDesign. Sometimes for really big sites, I'll use a Protoshare or a wireframing tool because I don't have to repeat a lot of this information. So I do it once. As I start to wireframe, if I make a change in a navigational item, it flows all the way down. I have to be a little that doesn't work quite as well when I'm working in InDesign. But my point here is that you do what works best for the project. So here we've got a big exploded tree map. Here we have a condensed tree map. So this looks a little bit more Windowsy, where you click and expand. So these are each sections. This is an expanded section. This is what I call the exploded box map, and I just made that name up. But we've got section names and then child pages that fall beneath that. So this is an easier way, I think, visually to show this expanded. This is the exact same project. But like I said, whatever works well for you and your team, obviously. So we work through a site mapping phase. We refine, we revise until we get to the point where we're happy with that overarching structure. Now let's move it to what are called wireframe prep. So you need to identify the key types of content and actions that the site or the tool is going to perform. There's no set number of wireframes because every project is different, but it depends on the different types of content that you will have and the types of functionality that the site is going to provide. So each unique experience requires a template. I say that, but then I also say, don't think that your tool or your site is so precious and so unique that it requires, 10 different templates, because there are only so many unique experiences in the world, right? Like polls, contact form, RSVPs. Those are essentially the same tool. They're a form-based tool that performs an action upon submit. So that requires one wireframe, not 3 wireframes. Again, I always say, I've said this twice already, I think, group like content with like content, like actions with like actions. So on a site, I would say that we typically probably on any common project do 4 to 7 wireframes for the front end. If there's complex functional requirements on the back end, we do as many as we need. But from the public marketing side, 3 to 7 tends to be about right for a website, but like I said, again, it really is going to depend on your particular product. Okay, so it's also important to determine click depth. Click depth is the number of clicks that a user or the search engine has to perform to get to the deepest level of your content. So when you were working on your sitemap, you determined how many child pages you have, how many grandchild pages you have, and you can see from that map how deep your site or your app is. So 3, 4 levels. 3 is common, 4 is not surprising. 5, maybe if you have, I don't know, a product that has a ton of data sheets or specs or something really minute. However, the user is not going to want to navigate their way down your sitemap, right? So you've got 4 levels down. That's just never going to happen. No one's going to take all those steps. So the goal is to reduce that click depth, to flatten your site by using drop-down menus, mega menus, exploded footers. There's a variety of constructs that will allow users to have to click less to get to content, but you can't decide what you need until you see what the click depth is. So your goal is to reduce it to like maximum of, well, I say maximum, here I say maximum of 4, while 3 is optimal. I would really say 2 is optimal. And using drop-down menus, you can flatten a site entirely to 1 if you allow people to see children and grandchildren. So you roll over a main nav and you get children, and then flies out to the right, you get grandchildren. Is this making sense? Okay, so that flattens a site to 1 click. Anyway, so investigating click depth is going to inform the use of what your drop-down, your mega menu, your navigational structure is, and also help you decide how robust your search tool needs to be. So how much content is on this site in its entirety? How advanced do I need to get with searching? Do I need to be allowing for filtering and sorting, etc.? Or is it a flat enough site that sort of a typical Google results page will work? So referring back to that sitemap is going to be really important in the click depth phase. Okay, so get wireframing. I love wireframing. It's one of my favorite parts. So, like I said, there are myriad excellent wireframing tools available. Refer back to Catherine's presentation in September. We use Protoshare. I've been using it for 5 years, and I continue with them as they upgrade. But again, it's not the tool that's doing the wireframing, it's you. You're the one who's driving it, you're making the decisions, you're just using a tool to help you. You're the one in charge. So identify where persistent items belong. So this is important because everyone's been to a site where things kind of move as you go from page to page. Navigation that you learned on the home page isn't the same on the inner pages, or one area your sub-nav is on the left and the other area is on the right. Things move around, so that's bad. Let there be persistent items, masthead, footer. Examples include logo, main navigation, your social media icons, your sharing icons, your footer, your contact info. Pick a place and leave it there. Determine the ratio of evergreen, semi-frequently, and frequently updated content. I think it's supremely important on the home and section landing pages that there be the appropriate mix between content that stays there, evergreen content that rarely changes. So that's your mission, that's the who we are. On a home page, semi-frequently, that might be your news and events. So it's updated 1 to 2 times a month maybe. And I really encourage the thinking about what I can automate too. So if I put a news item up on a page on the inside, it needs to bubble up automatically to the home page. So reduce the amount of effort that you have to do to keep things updated on the home page by pulling up content. You're already doing the work on the inner pages. Pull it up to the home page. And then frequently updating content. So that's maybe your Twitter stream, your blog, RSS feed. Find the ratio that seems to work, and a lot of this will be informed in your user experience phase, but what is that ratio that I need that keeps people coming back to my site frequently and quickly understanding who I am and what I do? In the wireframes, be very clear about the hierarchy of content. I'm going to show you examples of what wireframes look like, and they're not pretty, but I use size and weight of font to note general importance of information. Large boxes are of greater importance than small boxes. I mean, it's very elementary. Things that are higher up on the page are more critical to the understanding of that site or that page than things that are lower down. So none of these things seem like you have to be a brainiac to figure it out. But the point in the wireframing is to create this structure that is so easy to understand. All of a sudden, I get how this page is going to work, even if there's not any true content in it yet. Okay, so what does a wireframe look like? Some art school grads can draw. None of these are mine, but I bet you $20 that this is what Joe's sketchpad looks like. You can draw your wireframes, and when I say you, I mean you or the designers and developers you're working with. Wireframes can be drawn, they can be sketched. This is obviously an iPhone wireframe. Here's what looks like a home page. Again, whole site here. Notice how they are very, they're both vague and descriptive at the same time. So this is the text, squiggle, squiggle. This means it's a movie. It has a triangle. These are really sort of elementary functions here, but we're saying, or elementary shapes here, but we're saying that this movie on this page is really important because it is this big in the left column. And it only has a little bit of text underneath it to describe it because this is so important. And here, I'm going to say, okay, so I know that I want to have sort of many movies in this area. So I'm going to give these little thumbnails with a little bit of description. I don't need to spell out what this language is because that language is going to change all the time. This is an area that looks like it's going to be updated frequently. But what's important is that I get the overall hierarchy and importance on these pages. So this is the way I wireframe because I can't draw. So I use Protoshare to create wireframes. There is no difference between what I'm doing here and what someone is doing by drawing. Other than I have sort of the benefit of this trickle-down changes, so I make a change to my overall sitemap and it appears on every single page, whereas if you hand draw it, it's a lot of whiteout or crisscross. So here I'm showing, this is a recent project we did, homepage, landing page, third level page. So you can see really quickly, there's nothing visual, there's like 0 colors, except that I use these colored social media icons, but there's no color, there's no nice fancy font, there's just big font, bold font, big ugly button, main nav, search, got my tools up in this area. So what this lets me communicate to my client is what types of content, what types of messaging are we going to be talking about on this page, and how important should it be? Our mission is really important, so we're going to make it really big. And I'm going to show you what this design ended up looking like. And you'll see that it really doesn't look very much like this. It doesn't have kind of this mission content here. It doesn't necessarily look like this, but it forms this underlying structure that the design can lay over. So this is a main section landing page, third level page. You see now we're down to an area which has a lot of text. This is all lorem ipsum. It doesn't mean anything, but I'm saying that by the time you get to this page, there's like 3 times as much content as there is on a page a level higher up. And this is how a sub-navigation will expand to show people where they are. This is how the breadcrumb gets longer as you get onto an inner page. Okay, so what happens when you don't organize? And these are clients of mine, previous to their coming to me. So, and I wish I could show you both of these redesigns, but they're not live yet, and I don't have permission to share them. But this is what I call, there's no place for this content, so I'll just stick it on the homepage. In my world of nonprofits and associations, I see this a lot because very well-meaning people have given some money, or they've come up with a program, and they would like some credit, or the webmaster thinks, well, this is so important, I can't say no. But because I didn't work on the sitemap years ago and I didn't come up with any sort of logical groupings for these main nav items, there's just nowhere to put it. So I'll just put it right down here. Because everyone's going to see it all the way at the bottom, right? And this one, you see, this is ridiculous. Like, if these were the same width, this page would be like at Joe's feet, the bottom of the page. So what does this say besides the fact that I'm making fun of these super well-meaning clients of mine? They just didn't think very hard at the beginning, years ago, as to how this site was going to grow. Okay, so this is the other, there's a million perils of poor organization. But this one, I call this the you want choices, I'll give them to you. So, do you want inspiration? By the way, this is Pine Sol. Would you like some inspiration about Pine Sol? Would you like live in the outdoors of Pine Sol? Are you interested in? I mean, what I can't even fathom how much money this site costs for Pine Sol, and how ridiculous it is, right? I mean, if I showed a client a wireframe that looked like that, do you think that they would say, "Yeah, this sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's move forward with this"? This is their rollover navigation. So in their sitemap, they decided that there were like 34 ways that you could clean. If I had shown this as an exploded tree map, for instance, and it was exploded, there would be like this many items under cleaning surfaces, and we might have said, this doesn't really make sense. Like, what are like items here that we could turn this maybe into 4 children of tips for cleaning, by surface area perhaps, or by type of cleanser. But no, they thought that it would be good to show every single possible surface in the universe that you might want to clean in the navigation. So this one just jumped out at me as like so incredibly offensive in many ways.
On that? You don't know who their customers are. So what if their customers 34 is a good thing? I mean, right? I mean, what can you tell? I mean, I understand the point you're making, that maybe this is an egregious example, but maybe.
I think this is a highly egregious example, and I think it is the extreme. But you know what? I actually buy Pine Sol.
Yeah, we're all Pine Sol.
I mean, Pine Sol is what I use. I've never gone to their website previously to get tips for cleaning because I don't really care. I just throw it in the bucket, and then I mop my kitchen once a week, and it's fine, you know? But I would say that A, I am, to some degree, their client, and B, I am a design professional, and I can tell you that 34 choices for anything is a bad idea. 7 choices. I mean, I personally don't care enough about cleaning to even look at 8 things, but you know, I could understand maybe there's like 8 types of surfaces that you might want to clean, not 34, whatever number I just made up. Okay, so you've got your sitemap, you've got your wireframe, you've done your content inventory, you have this structure. The structural engineer has finished the plans, and now the architect is going to make the building look amazing. Or I love to sew, so I always say that the wireframes are like the dress form, and the design is the fabric that we lay over the dress form. It can take many different shapes, it can be different colors, it can be different textures, it can drape differently, but it still has this structure underneath that supports it. Without the structure, it just falls flat. I mean, literally, fabric would fall off a dress form if there were no form. And buildings would fall down if there was no structure. So, in interface design development, there are kind of 2 schools of thought right now, which I think are interesting, both interesting, and of value to this group too, because in ye olden days, when I graduated from college, the design process was straightforward. So You designed it in Photoshop. You used whatever tool you worked in, Dreamweaver, you cut, slice, dice, whatever you call it. They were two separate things. You designed and then you developed. But as browsers become more standards compliant, apart from a certain one that we won't name, this paradigm shift began to occur in our world because most of us web designers had learned how to cut HTML and code CSS because we had to, because we sort of got sick of handing our designs off to IT departments and then having them come back and not look like what we designed. So we learned HTML, we learned CSS, and we realized that we could condense the development time by doing it both ourselves. So that was me, like 8, 9, 10 years ago. People were starting kind of figuring that out. So we were already kind of condensing the design and development phase a little bit. But what people are doing now, the next step is combining it even, or condensing it even tighter. So we're actually designing in code. We're designing within an HTML construct, within a structure. So now instead of making this flat image in Photoshop, we're assigning these design principles. We're working with good principles that I'll talk about in a sec, but we're doing it in code. We're not doing it in Photoshop. And my world is still very torn about this. And frankly, I work on both sides of this. It depends, for me, it's project driven and it's timeline driven. But often, more times than not now, I would say, when I start a design, I'm looking at a responsive grid code that exists, and I'm starting to lay my visual design onto this grid, onto existing code. Does that make sense? Okay. So thus shortening the development cycle even more, because I no longer have these two discrete phases. So of course there's pros and cons to both. And I'll just go through these really quickly. So here, again, we're talking about designing in Photoshop. We're designing within code, designing straight in the HTML. So the two-step approach, which is the old way. Photoshop is easy to work with. Designers have been using it for years. It's pretty fast. It's a blank slate for a designer. It's like having a blank canvas for a painter, which I guess sometimes maybe can be nerve-wracking, but the world is my oyster when I have a blank Photoshop file. And it's safe, it's a traditional process. There's something that is a little comforting about kind of working within the confines of just design. The cons are that it's two distinct phases, and it's going to take, can take longer, it will take longer to get from start to finish, the beginning of a design and a fully launched product. This thing keeps vibrating in my hand.
You have 5 minutes to go.
Okay. Requested revisions will often take more time in Photoshop. And Photoshop is a platform that produces these static images. So they're JPEGs at the end of the day. There's nothing real about them. They're not live text. We can't really mimic what rollovers look like, what drop-downs are going to do, that kind of engagement. The one-step approach, the pros are rapid delivery, really, truly rapid delivery. Easier to revise style elements. So if I'm working in code and a client says, we love everything about it, but we really want you to change the color palette. Instead of going back to Photoshop and changing layer after layer after layer, I'm making a few changes in a CSS file, changing every single header. Anything that's an H1 used to be teal and now it's red. And that takes 7 seconds. The designer and the developer are the same person. That's not always the case here. But here, the person who's designing is the same one who's coding, front-end developer, I should say, which I think lends to good project oversight. The same set of eyes is on it from beginning to end. The cons, some people feel that working within the code confines can restrict creativity a little. It's not this blank slate. Your design can only be pushed as far as the designer can code. So unlike this, where if I design something that is so crazy out of this world, I can't actually make it happen, I find someone who can make it happen. Here, this is all me. And then the effort to create unique comps may be greater than using Photoshop first. So we usually develop 2 or 3 comps for clients. That is going to be a lot faster in Photoshop. But if I have a client whose timeline is tight, whose budget is right, and we've done the work at the beginning, we know exactly what this needs to look like, we can move into this phase and not do multiple comps. All right, I'm moving. Okay. Oh boy, sorry, I should have talked faster.
Which one's the cheapest?
I think with good project management and a really tight eye on the budget, the one-step approach is less expensive because it can be iteratively changed faster. Okay, so I'm going to move quickly, sadly, through the high-level design principles. So I'm going to tell you everything I learned in 4 years of art college. 2 slides and about 30 seconds. And luckily, I have some really good resources for you, so hopefully that'll help. What's critically important when you're talking to or working in design, talking to a designer or working with design? Strong layout and use of grid. So a strong underlying grid gives structure to your site design by providing sense of order, which are columns, and rest, which is white space. All good design, print and web, is based on the grid system, and it's the first principle we learn in art school. This is a fabulous book, Order and Disorder, Grid Principles for Web Design. This is the guy who did all the art direction for the New York Times, which is, I think, legitimately the easiest site to read on in the entire world. Anyway, great book. Typography. So typography can bring a design to life. It gives movement, music to the written word. However, it's super subjective and can be used really badly, and it's critically important on the web because it is harder, it is legitimately harder to read text on a website. So again, some good resources for good use of typography. Color theory and color contrast. So here, color is highly, supremely subjective. We all realize that, but it is so influential in terms of what you are saying to your users. Color more than anything else. So what colors work well on screen? What color palettes are complementary? What do color palettes say to people? So here is, I'm a big fan of color. I think that's how they pronounce it. I always say color, but it's so cutesy. But color is a really nice way to choose color palettes. And then color contrast, and this touches on accessibility. Because color contrast is the difference between background and type. Colors that are too close, red and pink, red and orange, pale gray and white. Lots of designers use pale gray text on a white background. It's impossible to read. So we as designers have to remember that the web is not a controlled medium. I do not know who is sitting there and reading this text, and you have to be super aware of that in terms of readability. Okay, so quickly, let's put it all together. So here's the wireframe that I showed you earlier, and here are the 2 designs that we presented to the client. You see the 2 designs don't look anything like each other, really. They have the same logo, and thus the logo determined that it's a pretty bright website. But they don't really look like this. But they have this content, they have this hierarchy, they have these navigation items, they have the search in the same general area. So you can see how it's important not to get to have your wireframe dictate design. But why that wireframe structure is really important, because without that, these would just be sort of pretty pictures. Inner page. Here's another one that we did recently, Denver Regional Council of Governments. Same thing, so 2 different design options. Sorry, that one's running off the edge. Very different, but based on that original wireframe structure. And inner pages there. So, I'm done. So, bye. So it was a pleasure talking to you guys. Sorry I ran over. Hope I didn't talk too fast. And please feel free to be in touch with me. And the presentation has all those resources in the design area. I know we went through that quickly, so I hope that'll be helpful. Thanks.
Great.
All these presentations are going to be up on the Lean Startup site, and we will have a few minutes for questions for everyone at the end. All right, so Joe has may I entice anyone with some pizza? Pizza, there's like 9 pizzas up here. Don't be shy, seriously. All right, so Joe has touched on strategy for your business. And Karin has talked about putting it all together, all the nuts and bolts.
I guess we'll take a break.
Yeah, and you know what? Why don't we take a